Hello everyone and welcome back to Video Editing 1 with Professor Harris. Today we're going to be covering Lesson 7, Introduction to Segment Effects. So when we talk about visual effects, we often think about spectacular spaceships and fights in space with superheroes and zombies. Those are awesome, but more often editors are using effects to repair shots with visual issues. So in this lesson, we'll be using these hidden effects to remove unwanted elements, improve color, smooth out shaky shots, and fix jump cuts. In other words, we will be exploring some typical tools used to improve a variety of imperfect shots. So we will be working in the Rock Climber project, so make sure you got your Rock Climber project loaded. Let's look at some goals for today. We're going to add effects to segments, stabilize a shaky shot, apply an automatic color correction, hide a jump cut, resize clips, and set keyframes. All right, let's get into it. So adding segment effects. In Media Composer, you'll work with three visual effect types. So we have transition effects. As you've learned, you'll apply these between two clips, often to emphasize a time or theme change. Transition effects include dissolves, dip to color effects, wipes, pushes, squeezes, spins, and so on. We also have segment effects. You'll add these to timeline segments to change the look of shot segment effects, also known as filters. This can include color effects, masks, resizes, and more. Then lastly is motion effects. You'll apply these to sequence segments or source clips to vary clip frame rate or speed. And you'll learn how to create motion effects later in this book in Lesson 9. So, as mentioned in Lesson 6, Introduction to Transition Effects, the effects palette includes a series of tabs across the top. So if we could tab over here to the effects palette, we can see these different tabs across the top. We have filters, transitions, audio track, and audio clip. These organize effects by type, and each type is further organized into categories on this left sidebar. As you may recall, you can click the category in the left panel. You can click any one of these, and it's going to have more effects typically inside. I like how I'm clicking all the ones that only have single effects. So we go to transition. If I do edge wipe, then we'll see all these different wipes appear in the menu. So you can find many of the most commonly used video effects in the image category. So if we go to filter and then image, we can find a lot of the most used effects by editors. In addition, you'll use the search field at the top of the filter effects list right here, and we can search for specific effects. So for example, up here in the search field, we could type flop, and as we are putting in letters, we can see, let me type slower here, if I do FL, Media Composer automatically starts to shorten the list, and while it's trying to look for related and matched search terms. So I'm going to do flop, and we'll see flop image, and that can then, we can take this effect and apply it to a segment in our timeline. Something quick to note here though is you have to make sure you're selected on the correct tab. If I type flop on the transitions tab, that effect won't be found in transitions or audio tracks or audio clip. So you need to at least have some idea what you're looking for before you go searching for it. So as far as transitions go, if I wanted an upper left diagonal, I know that I've got the upper left diagonal edge wipe option here in transitions. Whereas if I go to filters, it's going to show up here as well. But if I go to audio track, we're going to get nothing when we type in upper here. So just something to note. When you find the effect you want, you can choose it and how you want to add it to the timeline. To add that effect to the timeline or to a shot in the sequence, we can do one of the following. We can drag and drop the segment effect from the effect palette onto the timeline segment. We know that, so let's go to filters. Let me remove we'll type flop here, and this will flop the image. We can drag this right here, and now we've got it upside down, which is great. That's exactly what I wanted, of course. Again, you can remove effects at this button. Another way we could add effects to our segments in the timeline is making sure we're in effects mode. We could just select the clip and then go to our effects palette and double click, and that will add it to that specific effect. I'll undo that as well. The last way is we can make sure our segment mode tool is selected. So let's say we're in editor mode. We can make sure our segment mode tool is selected. While holding shift, we could select multiple segments at once. Then we could come up here to our effects palette and double click, obviously, the effect, and then it's going to add to those effects as well. So that's another way. And sweet, now we got a shot where he's climbing downward. Isn't that better? Awesome. All right, I'm going to undo all that because obviously I don't want those changes. But yeah, that's 3 ways to add effects into your timeline on your segments. Okay, let's look now at learning to love the effects mode. We are in effects mode right now, but new users can sometimes find working in effects mode frustrating. Two behaviors take some getting used to. So if you're working on a single display system like I am on a laptop or an iMac, dual display is obviously very spacious and lovely, but not realistic for your work situations all the time. So let's look at two interface nuances that may induce frustration while building effects in a single display environment, and more importantly, how to resolve them. So firstly, you can click the effects mode button and open the effects editor. So if we were in edit and we clicked the effects mode button right here, we could see we've got a little bit more space. I think it saved my, here, let me reset. We'll restore my, there we go. So if I hit effects mode now, we're going to see it opens up this little window. This is our effects editor. But as we can see, it's covering up our bins, and if I want to get to my effects, I'd have to go to the effects palette. This is still covering up my search bar. It's just kind of cluttered. So introducing to you, not that you haven't already seen it, but we have the effects workspace. When we hit the effects workspace, it takes the effects editor, it puts it dead center, and then when we're working with effects that are already in our timeline, we can instantly be editing them right here in our effects editor by default. And this is much better for a single display workspace because otherwise, we'd have windows sitting on top, and that can be very obnoxious when you're trying to add and edit effects. We can also boost efficiency by mapping the effects workspace to our keyboard. So we could set this to be a button on our computer, on our keyboard, so we could quickly be switching by just a tap of the button from edit mode to effects mode without having to, again, go through the problem of having that floating effect editor bin and crowding up our workspace and having to tab through with stuff behind. So how do we do that? Let's go about that. So we're gonna want it to make sure we're in the mode we want. So I'm gonna exit editor. I'm gonna close that real quick just for now. But what we can do is we can hit Command 3. That's gonna open our command palette. And we can make sure that menu to button reassignment is on. Okay, so now we gotta open our keyboard. So we'll go to File and then Settings. And then we can double click under Users, the Users tab. You can double click the keyboard. And then we can pull our keyboard down here. We'll shrink this window. And then I'm going to actually set this to my second keyboard by using a modifier key. So if I hold Shift, then I can see an alternative keyboard. So when I want to switch between editor and effect, I'll do Shift and then the next key. So I already have it set to 1, but I'm going to set it to 1 again for you guys to show you how to do it. Making sure menu to button reassignment is selected in our command palette. We'll hold Shift, select the 1 button until it's highlighted. Then we'll go to Windows, Workspace, and we'll click Effects. And then now it is remapped. It was mapped before, but it's remapped to that. So now I can close these windows. And I'm currently in the Editor Workspace, but if I hold Shift 1, we'll see me jump to Effects mode, and the Effects Editor comes up. And I can hold Shift 2, I'll jump right back to Edit mode. Shift 3 takes me to Color. Shift 4 takes me to Audio. And I like to just have that set up so I can switch between each one very quickly and efficiently. So you don't have to set it up that way. You could set it up to a different button on your main keyboard. But again, I like just Shift 1. It's just simple. My left hand's there, and it works great for me. All right, sweet. Moving on. Let's look at the next little nuance as far as the effects editor mode goes. So if we scrub through the track or ruler in the timeline to review an effect, either the effect editor disappears or it becomes empty. So let's say I had an effect. Let's drag this effect onto the shot here. This beautiful black diagonal effect. Here in the effects editor, top right corner, that filter we've just put on. If I start to scrub through the timeline to look at it, it goes blank. So what's happening? When you click the timecode track or ruler, Media Composer takes you out of the current mode and back to source record mode. This is great if you're ready to review a section of your sequence, annoying if you're trying to continue tweaking an effect. So to resolve this, we can develop the habit of scrubbing through the playback effects in the effect preview monitor and consider mapping the effect mode button to a key on our keyboard again. So if I hit, if I hit Shift 1 that we just mapped, so I can switch back to effects mode, we'll see that effect editor come back up for the shot. It went away again. Shift 1, and we should be using the effect mode preview to be reviewing the effect preview monitor to be reviewing what we're doing in these shots. So that can be annoying, but just remember you should be reviewing the effect here and not down in your timeline. Okay, sweet. Let's move on now to an introduction to markers, which is something we can't do here in effects mode. So let's switch over to edit mode and we'll start talking. So during this lesson's exercise, you'll be navigating to markers to complete the director's request. Let's take a quick look at how markers work so you can not only be successful when using them during this exercise, but also add a valuable tool set to your post-production workflow. So what are markers? They're essentially these little red guys. We've been seeing these red guys all over our sequence this entire time. What's going on here? Why are these there? These are director's markers, and these are markers you can set in as well. So to move the timeline position indicator to a desired location, so first, if we're going to set a marker, we're going to find a spot that's bad. So let's say we didn't want this shot to have a giant black line going through the middle of it. We could set a marker here at the beginning. All right, we could hold Command to snap to the beginning, the head frame. And then I could activate the target record track selector blue, for example, V1 or TC1. So we'll just activate TC1 for now. We'll turn off the V1 and A1, and we'll just leave TC1 on now for now. Then we'll click the Add Marker button in the record monitor, which is right here. This is the Add Marker button. So once we click this, boop, it's going to give us this little window. So in the Edit Marker dialog box, we can comment and then click OK. So we could say, I don't want, a giant black thing in this shot. So now we've got our little director's note, and we can go ahead and click OK. So now when someone in post-production is working and they see this little marker, they're going to hit it and they can review that right here. It says, I don't want that giant, excuse me. Excuse me. I don't want a giant black thing in this shot. And so now they know to remove that. So that's a quick tool for you. And this is a quick tool for you. You can make notes for yourself. So let's say you do a rough cut of a sequence. You could go through, can add a bunch of markers first, and then figure out exactly what you want to do to your timeline before you actually get in and edit it. And then this can be helpful too if you're maybe passing on your project to the next editor so he can understand what you're looking for as well, or what you've left him with, or it's kind of making a to-do list of what you're going to do with your edit. So if we want to view and navigate to existing sequence markers, we can go to Tools, Markers. So Tools, and then we can go to Markers. I'm blind. Here it is. And then we can review the markers right here. So we can ensure either the timeline or record monitor is active, and we can double-click the markers in this tool. So let's say I double-click this, it's going to jump to the specific position where this marker occurs, rather than dragging through the timeline. Cool. We can see I'm the editor that made this. I don't want that giant black thing in the shot, right? Perfect. So this is the marker tool, and what a useful tool it is. All right, let's move on now to stabilizing a shaky shot or shaky footage. So common problems you'll encounter as an editor is unstable camera work. I know even filming my own stuff, I'm surprised when I get into editing how shaky some shots can be. But shaky shots often occur with documentaries, since using tripods isn't always possible. You're chasing after somebody, you're trying to get the story, and people are, punching at the camera, things like that. It's going to be shaky inevitably. Other filming genres might include sequences with intentionally unstable footage to convey a handheld shot look and energy. What was a movie I saw a while ago? I can't remember what it's Cloverfield. Cloverfield was shot this way. It's similar like the Blair Witch Project and that kind of shot style. But sometimes it's too shaky and it does need to be smoothed out. We can smooth out the shots in Media Composer simply by adding an effect. So we can remove all camera motion and lock the shot down so it's more stable. Or we can use this to completely eliminate bumps and jitters to keep the general camera movement intact. So essentially stabilize with this stabilization effect is very awesome. So to do this, we're going to click the Filters tab along the top of the effects palette. So making sure we're selected in the effects palette, click filters, and then in the filters, we're going to select in the image category. And then in the image category, we have the stabilize effect. We can drag the stabilize effect. Oh, I need to put it on a shot that makes sense. If we go to our director's markers, I believe this marker here says stabilize, or was, let me pull up this is a good time to use my markers. So we go to tools, we go to markers. I'm blind, there's markers. And where's the one that said stabilize? Here, stabilize and lock down. All right, it's this shot. So this shot's shaky. So I know this shot. So I can shrink that so we can reference it later. So it's R04-148. So we'll add this stabilize effect to this shot. Once we add it, Media Composer is going to do a bunch of stuff. It's going to open the tracking window. It's going to start putting little green dots on the screen. It's going to start analyzing the camera's movements. We can see that little jitter just then. And now it's coming up with a modified clip. It's modifying the clip to stabilize it. So once it's done, we can actually close the little window. But before we close it, let's break down what it's actually doing and how it works. So once we apply the effect, the tracking window opens and Media Composer initiates the stabilization process by analyzing and comparing every frame to extract the camera's motion data. During this process, again, those green dots like we saw appeared on the right and they disappear. Then after Media Composer analyzes the entire segment, the stabilize effect inverts the motion data and applies it to the clip. For example, if the camera suddenly jerks down and to the left, the stabilizing effect will offset this by responding the frame up and to the right. So it's just analyzing the shot, it's making adjustments to counteract those sudden movements. Cool. To prevent the frame's edges from coming into view, the stabilize effect scales the image to fill up the screen. The result is a much smoother camera movement in our shot. So we can compare the smooth segment to the original by clicking the green enable button in the effect editor to disable the parameter and then play the clip. And we can click it again to re-enable it. But what is the scaling effect doing? So if we disable the scaling parameter, so let's make it so we can see what we're doing here. If we disable the scaling parameter, we can see how Media Composer applies a motion effect. So we can click it here, the motion data to the clip. So when we play the effect and the frame moves around within the effect preview monitor, then it moves around in the effect preview monitor. This reflects the motion data that's offsetting the camera movement. So if we hit it here, we can see the frame jumping around while it's trying to offset that movement, that original movement, to keep the shot nice and steady. All right, so a few notes here. Stabilize, the rest of the story. Stabilize is a fantastic effect for its speed, ease of use, and quality results, but like any fully automated effect, it has limitations. Therefore, the stabilize effect includes a manual feature that lets you better control the process. That and Media Composer includes a 3D warp effect, a feature-rich effect with stabilizing effects built into it. Nice, but overkill if you need to only stabilize a shot. So generally, the stabilize effect is all you need. That said, you can learn more about working with the manual stabilizing effect and the 3D warp in the courses within the Avid learning series. So there's more to learn from avid.com, essentially, is what they're plugging themselves there for. All right, let's look now at locking down a shot. Well, let's make sure we turn back on their scaling here. We can preview that again real quick. Just see what's going on in that shot. Very cool. Anyway, what was I saying? Oh yeah, we were getting on to locking a shot, right? All right, let's move into that. So more traditional stabilization techniques aim to create a lockdown shot, thus removing all camera movement. The result is as if it was shot on a tripod during the shot, the original shot. So to accomplish this in Media Composer, you'll use the stabilize effect and make one slight change. I will say also that when we were looking at the marker tool, which is here, this shot not only says stabilize, it also says lock down. So this is something we want to do to this shot. This is an adjustment we are going to make in the settings of our stabilizing tool, our stabilizing effect here. So I'm going to go ahead and close our marker. All right, so what are we going to do? So by default, the stabilize effect uses a feature called steady glide. Steady glide allows movement on one axis, up or down or left or right, while eliminating movement on the other axis. For example, it keeps horizontal pan while eliminating any vertical wobbles introduced by the camera operator. So if you disable steady glide, you can often produce a result that looks tripod steady. To lock down a shot with the stabilize effect, we're going to do the following. So with the filters tab along the top of the effect palette, we would add, we'll drag and drop the stabilize effect into our segment in the timeline. We've already done all right. We were going to wait for the tracking window to do its thing. We've already done that. We let the tracking finish earlier. Here, now we're going to go over and we are going to turn off the steady glide button, and then, which is this guy here, enable steady glide. So we're going to disable steady glide. Now we can preview this and see how much more stable the shot is. Look at that. Look how it's holding that fixed. It's not going left and right. It's just keeping it steady locked. We'll watch that again. That's with steady glide turned off. If I turn steady glide back on and we hit play, we can see how the shot is moving up and down slightly, and we are getting that movement. So we'll disable steady glide, and now we have something that looks as if it was shot on a tripod. Awesome. All right, and one thing we can do now is we can close these little settings tabs, and that's going to save our effect. It's going to save right here, and we have that effect well established and set up in our timeline. Sweet. All right, let's move on now to using automatic color correction. At times, you'll encounter footage with poor exposure, low contrast, or color balance problems. Automatic color correction can help solve these common issues and improve the look of your program. The image here shows the difference. This is directly from your book. It shows the difference that you can make by adding a color correction here in Avid Media Composer. So let's talk about setting up a color correction. Let me close this bad boy first. The color correction color correction effect, which you can find in the image category. So if we come over here to filters, we go to image, we can find color correction here. Is an automated effect like stabilize. However, with this effect, you'll set up corrective actions in your user settings before you apply the effect. So buckle up here, folks. There are a bunch of settings that you can set on the user settings of your account. So for me, that would be B. Harris to change what happens when I do add a color correction to a shot. I'm going to pick somewhere else in the timeline. We'll pick a different shot for color correction. I don't know. We'll use this shot. Cool. So one thing you need to note here, and like I said, it's just going to be glued to your user settings, is that there's ways to enable and disable, and it's very similar to the keyboard earlier. We saw that. Let me pull up the keyboard and explain a little bit here. If we go to user settings and we go to keyboard, where's keyboard? Keyboard. We can see we have these different keyboard settings. Essentially what you're going to be doing is we're going to create something new here under corrections here that will change the way that the color correction adds to your project. So for instance, we could change our keyboard settings by clicking one of these, and we can even make a custom keyboard setting or a custom keyboard layout. We'll be doing the same thing with correction, and we'll be setting up custom corrections, and we can choose between which one we want to work or which one we want active when the color correction is actually added to the project. So let's get into that. We'll start by opening the settings. So we'll go to File and then Settings, like we just had option. We'll make sure we go to Users on the Users tab, and then we'll double-click Correction here. Now, in Correction, we're going to want to make sure that we are selected on the Auto Correct tab, and then we can read here, it says, when applying color corrections from the Effect palette, bingo, it will perform the following operations. And this is where we're going to set what we want to happen. So first we're going to click this drop-down box that says Nothing, and we're going to change this to HSL Auto Contrast first, and then next we're going to set it to HSL Auto Balance. So those are two actions in a row that we want it to do. We'll hit OK. We don't have to set a third action. And we can create another option by right-clicking here on Correction. We can do Duplicate. Now we can double-click this other option that we've created. Make sure, again, we're selected in Auto Contrast, and we can change this first one to Curves Auto Balance, and the second one to Curves Auto Contrast. And this is the process through which it's running the image. It's going to adjust the balance, and then it's going to adjust the contrast. We'll hit OK. We could set a third thing. Again, we don't have to. Now we have these two options like I was talking about. But how do we tell these apart? They both just say correction. Well, there's actually a text field over here on the right. And here we're going to type HSL auto contrast / balance. Then we know that this is going to do the HSL auto contrast and then balance. And we'll do this one, and we'll do curves auto balance / contrast. And again, now we know it's going to do where it's going to do the curves, auto, balance, and then contrast. Now we can pick between which option we want. We've got them nicely differentiated. If you're not sure if you named the correct ones, you can double click, go to autocorrect, and make sure it's curves. Oh, nope, see, that's exactly why no, it's correct. Curves, auto, balance, and curves, auto, contrast. See, we know the settings are correct. Make sure you're giving things meaningful names. Like if we come down here to keyboard, we see we've got MC English United States, we've got another version, we've got Premiere Pro. So giving your options that you have in Media Composer meaningful names, very, very important. Cool. All right, now let's look at actually applying these automatic color corrections. So after we configure our color corrections effect, we can simply drag the effect from the timeline to a timeline segment. The image will immediately show the results. So we're going to close here out of this bad boy. Make sure we're selected on color correction, and we're going to drag this to the shot that we're on currently because it doesn't look too nice. And boom, we can instantly see the color correction that has been made, which is awesome. It looks a lot better. Let's try the other one though. So I'm going to hit Command Z. I'm going to undo the addition of this effect. So it goes back. We can go back to File and then Settings. And then under Corrections, click this little drop down. We can switch to HSL Auto Contrast. We'll see if this one looks any better. So now we can close this. We're going to add it. I'm going to see what the difference is. I like this better. I think this looks less blue scale. So it looks great. In addition, you can leverage the segment selection techniques we learned in Lesson 5, refining the sequence, to add automatic corrections to multiple or an entire sequence with just a few clicks. So if we wanted to apply color correction effect to an entire sequence, we could do one of the following. We could select the destination tracks with our segment mode tool. So we could have this bad boy selected, and we could select on which ones we want. Maybe we want to hold shift. We could do a bunch in a row. We could skip a few. And then all you'd have to do is double click the color correction. We could also, I don't know why everything's already selected. Let's disable some of our track selectors here. We could also drag, select, and lasso. So we could lasso all these shots, and then they're all selected. We could double click the color correction, and it's going to take a second, but boom, it adds a color correction to all of our shots. So now they all look just a little bit more clear, a little bit crispier, and that's great. That's great. And that's all good and dandy, but we have to understand that there are some limitations to the automatic color correction. So as you've seen, automatic color correction can solve basic problems quickly, like a fully automatic function, though it won't produce a perfect result in every situation. Why isn't that? Well, the system can't see what's actually in the scene. It doesn't see the landscape, it doesn't understand skin tone and faces, it can't differentiate between the foreground and the background. It only recognizes black, white, yellow, blue, and so on. Therefore, the system makes assumptions about the colors in the frame, assumptions that may or may not be correct. The automatic corrections do not compare one shot to another. Media Composer only references the segment's first frame to correct it. So it's not looking across the entirety of our project. It's not making sure that the same balances and curves are set on every shot. It's just looking at each individual shot. I mean, you can tell the difference between this one. I mean, look at his skin tone, and this one is much oranger in this other shot here. So besides all this, many color correction problems are not good candidates for automatic correction. So these include, here are a few things that you want to avoid if you don't think autocorrect can fix these three things. First, extreme lighting. Second, extreme color balance problems. And third thing is images lacking the appropriate distinction of black or white regions. So first, extreme lighting conditions. If a significant area of the image is deliberately overexposed or underexposed, automatic color correction may misunderstand the intent and produce an undesired result. So it could go to an extreme if you're filming an extreme as a stylistic decision. Extreme color problems, but color balance problems. So automatic color correction might not provide the expected results on images with extreme white balance issues or mixed lighting conditions where part of the image is white balanced and the other part is not. And then the third thing, image lacking the appropriate distinction of black or white regions. Automatic color correction is only effective on images with content for calculating black or white or both, such as a strong highlight, white or close to white, and a strong shadow, black close to black. So it needs to look for those dark contrasts to make proper decisions. Okay, that's enough of color correction for now. Let's move on to hiding jump cuts with the fluid morph. And we've got just the jump cut right here. All right, we'll get into it. Although most corrective effects are segment effects, Media Composer has a unique transition effect that can solve jump cuts. 2 shots of the same subject edited back to back with only a slight difference between them. This can be jarring to a viewer and pull them out of the story if they're looking at this guy's head snapping around. So we're trying to have this nice promo, and then this dude, we have a jump cut here. There's a very obvious jump cut. His head shifts position, his eyes come back up. It's very jarring, and it's very obviously cut and chopped up. Again, this is a jump cut. So he said something earlier, and then he blabbered on, and we did a jump cut to something else that we thought was important. But because these images are so closely related, we can add an effect called the fluid morph effect. So let's get into how to doing that so this looks more seamless and less jarring. All right, so first we're going to pull up our effects palette, and we have our effects palette open. We're going to go to filters, and under filters, we're going to illusion FX. Under illusion FX, we're going to find fluid morph. Alternatively, you could just do all, and you could search, making sure you were set on the filters tab. But for the sake of this, we're going to go straight to. We're going to then drag the effect directly in the timeline at the transition point where we want this to occur. So now we've got a fluid morph. Now we want to edit this, so there's 2 ways we could do that. We could hit the effects mode button here, which is going to pull it up. Because I am in effects, I was an editor before. That's going to have this little menu. We don't want that. We want to go to effects. Or if you mapped it the way I did, you can hit Shift 1, and that will take us over to the effects as well. Anyway, so in the effects editor, we're going to shorten the effect duration, and we're going to set it to 5 frames. So where are we going to shorten the duration? Down here. This is the effects editor duration. This is set to 1 second, also known as 24 frames. So we'll backspace this 1, we'll make it a 0, because it goes seconds and then frames. I'm going to come over here, we're going to backspace this 0 and make it a 5. So now we have 00:05. That is a 5 frame. We'll hit enter. When we hit enter, we're going to see this effect is going to shorten. Enter. It shortens. Boom. Now we have a 5 frame effect. Now, you need to improve the results. If we need to improve the results, we can click the disclosure triangle to expand the fluid morph parameter group and enable feature match. So we can hit feature match, and that's going to improve our shot here. So now when I drag over this, we're going to see a much smoother transition. Still a little bit weird, but a lot smoother than a hard jump cut from one shot to the other. So we're doing much better. But I'm a dum-dum because I'm working in the timeline. I need to be working right here in the effect preview monitor. So I should be previewing this effect here and seeing how it looks. And that's how it's looking. Now it looks like he's just naturally turning his head up and his eyes come up with him. So it's looking a lot better. We can also experiment with switching the source pop-up to stream or still to stream or stream to still. What am I saying? We can switch this. So we can find which option works best. So stream to stream, we'll try it up. Again, I'm doing the wrong thing. Got to make sure I'm clicking in this bad boy. And when we're in the effects, well, now we've lost it. If I click effects, let's make sure I hovered over this effect. I click the effects, that's going to pull back up where I was with my fluid morph. I should be working in this. I should preview it here. Okay, stream to stream is not bad. Let's try still to stream. Let's see how it looks now. Honestly, I don't know what I like more. Still to still. I think still to still looks the most natural. We'll go still to still. And then we can just keep tweaking the transition duration to make it what we think is right. We could make this even shorter. We can make it a little longer. I think right now at 5 frames, I don't think it looks bad at all. I think this is pretty good. I think this will work. So, and then we'll click render effect at the bottom of the effect editor and play the result in real time. So now we can hit render effect, and this is going to bring us to the render effect menu, and we'll go to, we can do application, we can do background process. We're going to do application for now, and we'll hit OK. It is now rendering the effect. Why is it rendering the effect? Because it's got a little, or it had a little blue check mark. Remember the difference between the little green? Well, this had a little blue. Fluid morph is not a real-time effect. Although we can view it in the effect preview monitor, that doesn't mean we can view it in the timeline. These are real-time effects. So these color changes, all these motion blurs, and all these other things, those are real-time effects. Fluid morph is not. We can see fluid color map, fluid blur, all these are not real-time effects. So when we add them to their timeline, they're going to be blue. Cool. Okay, next. Fluid morph works best when most of the image is the same and the difference in the object that moves is subtle. So for this, for example, with this shot, we do have a subtle movement. So we know that this guy's not moving too much. So now I could play this in the timeline and we could see what the real effect is. Five frames might be a little too quick. I mean, it still kind of looks like a jump cut, but we could play with this. I think the biggest thing going on right now might be the color, because we could adjust these color effects to make this match a little better, but because right now that second shot is a little darker, a little grayer, so we could fix that for the future. But just for the sake of this little tutorial, we're going to leave it. So keeping in mind that feature match, enabling this, if the default settings don't produce the accurate results, by default Fluid Morph uses each image's luminance to create a warp. Feature match aligns feature patterns as it warps both images, so that's why we clicked feature match. It was aligning both shots together. Then the source menu, by default Fluid Morph uses the freeze frame in place of a moving video duration, the form still to still. So it uses a still to still as a default. This produces more reliable results, but may not be or may not look realistic depending on the type of shot that we use. Stream to stream warps each side of the transitions frame by frame and produces the most realistic result if and only if the movement doesn't vary much. Otherwise, you might end up with artifacts. So you might end up with fragmentation, and it's going to look weird when it does morph. So it has to be very, very similar shots for that stream to stream to work best. And then stream to still or still to stream splits the difference. These settings lower the complexity by creating freeze frames for one shot while producing more realistic results because the other shot moves. So again, another way that it would render. And then we have duration. Shortening and then tweaking the duration can play a significant role to having a positive impact on our results. So for your sake, you should just goof around with this. This isn't great. This isn't horrible. I mean, this is pretty bad. I won't lie. This is pretty bad. You could come up with something better, and I want you to. So there you have that. Many complex effects require rendering before you can see them in normal playback speed. Media Composer adds a blue dot. I just talked about this to non-real time effects in our timeline. So let's say we wanted to drag the fluid color map to this shot. We're now going to get that little blue icon appears. So we would have to render this shot before we could actually view it here in our timeline. So you have that for reference. Remember, green dot means real-time effect. Very nice. All right, let's move on to the next thing. And that would be resizing a shot. Just kidding, we are not moving on. There's another fluid morph that needed to be added here. And I took the liberty of doing some settings, and now we can look at how beautiful and seamless this is. Look at that, very nice. So this second cut, I used stream to stream, I used feature match, and it looks way, way, way better than that other one. So yeah, again, just playing around with it, playing with duration. I got mine again set to 5 frames. I think it looks best. I'm gonna go ahead and render this one out now. And we'll hit OK and render it. And we can see how beautiful and crispy it is. Oh yeah, very nice. Look at that. Look at that. Can't even tell it's there. Awesome. All right. I have a burning question that for myself. What happens if you add a fluid morph to 2 completely different shots? So let's goof around with that now. beep. Oh my goodness, look at his face. Look at his face. All right, we'll do feature match. Oh my gosh. Or maybe we shouldn't. I want this to look as bad as possible. We'll do stream to stream, and yep, okay, all right, perfect. And then we'll just hit render. We're just gonna render it. We're gonna see how this looks. I'm gonna leave it at 24 frame. Oh, we got a big render going. It's gotta render a whole second. All right, we'll just sit here and wait till this finishes. Oh, bingo, we're good. Time to check her out. Oh, beautiful, look at that. Look at that. Oh, that's a meme edit right there. Awesome. All right, well, now you know. Now you know what happens. And now I know. All right, let's actually move on now to resizing a shot. I'm going to undo that because I should keep it professional here. I could just remove the effect by hitting the remove effect button. Okay, resizing a shot. If you've ever taken a photo and used the crop tool to cut out unwanted scenery around the edges, you'll understand the value of resizing clip in Media Composer. Instead of cropping down a photo, you'll scale up the shot. The results are the same. You remove unwanted material around the shot's edges, and you guide the viewer's attention toward a specific area. To do this, you'll use the following resize effect as follows. So we're going to go to the image category in our effects palette menu. We're going to select the resize. There it is, there's resize. And then we're going to drag it down into our timeline where it's needed. But I believe there is, let me go to my tools and we'll go to markers and we'll see, I believe there is, yep, the last shot needs to be resized. So I'll double click this to snap to where they want the resize done, which is here. So we'll drag that resize effect to our timeline. But wait a minute, what happens when you put an effect over an existing effect? We already learned this, it replaces the effect. So if I drop this right now, that color effect, the color adjustment we made is going to go away. How do I add both effects to the same segment in the timeline without removing my previously developed progress? Well, the answer, my friend, is the Option key. Option or Alt, depending on which operating system you're on. You just click and hold Option, and when I drop it, it's going to add this effect and nest it. It's going to auto nest. So now we can see our color corrections has stayed intact, and it's on its own layer. And we still have the resize effect here, which we're going to adjust the parameters of now. So we're going to make sure we got it nested properly without destroying our other work, our color correction. In the effects editor up here, we're going to click through the disclosure triangles to expand the resize parameter groups, and we're going to adjust the parameters to customize the resize effect. So we'll select the fixed aspect checkbox, drag that resize effect to our timeline. But wait a minute, what happens when you put an effect over an existing effect? We already learned this, it replaces the effect. So if I drop this right now, that color effect, the color adjustment we made is going to go away. How do I add both effects to the same segment in the timeline without removing my previously developed progress? Well, the answer, my friend, is the Option key. Option or Alt, depending on which operating system you're on. You just click and hold Option, and when I drop it, it's going to add this effect and nest it. It's going to auto nest. So now we can see our color corrections has stayed intact, and it's on its own layer. And we still have the resize effect here, which we're going to adjust the parameters of now. So we're going to make sure we got it nested properly without destroying our other work, our color correction. In the effects editor up here, we're going to click through the disclosure triangles to expand the resize parameter groups, and we're going to adjust the parameters to customize the resize effect. So we'll select the fixed aspect checkbox. So again, making sure that that fixed aspect button is selected. We'll now make some adjustments. So let's move the bottom. Move the bottom up to hide this guy at the bottom. Move the left in a tad, maybe to there. The right in a bit as well. Okay, not bad. And we'll go from there. If you increase the segment scale, you reduce the image's quality. So you'll want to enlarge the image to a reasonable amount that avoids generating noticeable picture degradation. So unlike the effects that you've used so far, you can manipulate the resize effect directly in the effect preview monitor. Let's look at how this works and go over some simple tips. So when you enter effect mode, that white outline, we can see that white outline has appeared around our shot, right? And that's the frame. That's the frame that can be manually adjusted directly in the effect preview monitor. To scale the image, we can drag the white corner handles to directly manipulate it, but we can't quite see it. So we can use these little reduce and enlarge buttons so we can zoom out. Additionally, if you're selected in the composer window, you can hit Command K and L, and those will make it larger and smaller as well. But you have these buttons here if you forget that. I would prefer that you remember Command K and L. But this upper right handle specifically is the best. That's going to lock that fixed ratio so we can really shrink it in or pull it back out, making sure that it's correct. So that's the handle for that. We can adjust the image's position by clicking inside the white outline and dragging. We can also click in here and we can move this around. So that'd be another way. We could adjust where the shot is sitting within this black screen, right? Let me undo all that so it's not in a dumb place. What else can we do? To make working outside the borders, we can do that little zoom in and out thing I just told you about. Makes things a lot easier. Anytime you directly manipulate the image, Media Composer adds a keyframe. If you don't need the keyframe, click it and press the delete key. A selected keyframe turns pink. So we've made some adjustments here on our shot. We can see a keyframe has been added. We can select it and hit delete, and that will remove that keyframe. We don't want, so what are keyframing? What are these keyframes doing? So essentially those keyframes, if I added one here and then manipulated my image and then added another one here, those changes would appear. They would jolt. So we would have a consistent shot and then it would change. We'd have a consistent shot, it would change. So we could add keyframes if we wanted to kind of like do a dramatic effect where we're zooming in, kind of like jumps, almost jump cuts, zooming in on him. That could be stylized or stylistic if you want, but we will move on. In addition to reduce button, you can also use the keyboard shortcuts to enlarge and reduce the effect in the preview monitor. I just said that. They're the same keyboard shortcuts we've used to reduce representative frames in a bin or enlarge those same frames. We've been using the Command K and Command L in the timeline to increase and decrease the size of tracks and wavelength heights and all kinds of fun stuff. Remember this when we hit wavelength and then we hit Command Option L and Command Option K, and it's not working right now because I don't have the track selected because I'm a ding dong. Yeah, see now it's working. So remember all that? Yeah, fun stuff. I'm going to deselect that and I'm going to close this. Cool. Before you resize the image from within the effect preview monitor, you may find it helpful to open the scaling parameter, which is here. We already have it open. In the effect editor. That way you can monitor the scale values as you change them in the effect preview monitor. So if we're moving this around, we're going to see, or if we're adjusting these handles, we're going to see the scale. We're going to see these numbers change. So I'm going to undo those. As you can see, you can quickly adjust the size and position within the effect preview monitor. But what about crop? Since no crop handles exist in the effect preview monitor, that's over here, there's no crop tools. You'll adjust it in the effect editor, so that would be here. We've already made some adjustments to this. You'll adjust these crop parameters to cut out unwanted areas around the frame edges without scaling the image. Because resize isn't a compositing or blending effect, cropping reveals a solid color background rather than a transparent area. To change the background color, we can adjust it in the background parameters. So if we wanted to go to background parameters, we could select this color, and then we could even choose a color. We could find out the values from our shot and go, oh yes, very nice. We like the green. And we've picked the green, and now the green is the new background color. Green's kind of ugly, so we're going to make it even uglier. We'll do this blue. Come on. Oh, I have to select the little eyedropper, come to the shot, we'll hit blue. Now we have this lovely baby blue. Awesome. So, do the background parameters in the image above or the image here look similar? That background color, does this seem familiar to you? Well, it should, because it's the same kind of parameters we were setting in the dip to color effects when we were working on this in lesson 6, which is awesome. So there we have it. Let's move now into working with keyframes. You didn't actually think I was going to leave it looking like this, right? Like you have at least that much faith in me. Okay, We're going to finish up here by scaling, right? We're going to scale in, and we can adjust it manually right here. Pull it right down. Boom. We got our shot. That's a little zoomed up, but that's fine. I'm going to leave it. And then, bam, we've got our shot. We've got our shot rescaled. So now we don't have that guy at the bottom playing with ropes, and now it's much nicer. Okay, let's actually get into keyframes now. So when you modify the segment effects covered in this lesson, the adjustment affects the entire segment. What if you want adjustments, for example, to change over time? Well, we'll be using keyframes to accomplish this. Keyframes tell Media Composer two very important things that you need to remember. Number one is when you want a change to start and end, and what change you want to be made between that start and end. So you'll most likely add keyframes in pairs. So you can think of them as start and end points of a change that you're trying to make on a specific effect or transition, or whatever it may be. That's because Media Composer calculates the end or interpolates the action between two keyframes. So for example, we could add, let's say, a color effect onto this shot here with the hand, and we can click effects, and then if we're in effects, that should open, yep, that opens our effects editor. We can also click the effect mode button, that will open our effect editor. Okay, notice here we've got a little keyframe icon there, we've got one here. Let's shrink some of these drop downs because I'm only interested right now in chroma adjustment. So we'll set it that way. So the position indicator's location determines where the keyframes get added. So the position indicator here in our effect preview monitor. A combination of the effect you're building and your work style can determine how you approach keyframing. You can add keyframes by either directly manipulating the parameters in the effect preview, for example, the resize effect size and position parameters. So we could be modifying it directly in here, and we could be adjusting those handles that we saw earlier when we were using the resize effect, and then adding another keyframe. Or we can click the Add Keyframe button under the effect preview monitor, or pressing the semicolon key works as well. That's a default in Media Composer. So if I hit the semicolon key, that's going to add a keyframe. For some reason, for me today, okay, I've activated something I didn't mean to. Okay, for some reason today, with me and Avid Media Composer, clicking this Add Keyframe button is not working. When I click it, nothing seems to happen. So what I found that is working is over here in the effect editor, I can hit Add Keyframe here, and I can add it to active groups or add it to open groups. So I don't have any adjustments made, so I can't add it to active groups. But let's try something first. So under Chrome Adjustment, I'm going to click Invert, and I'm going to hit Add Keyframe. It should let me add a keyframe, but it is not. I'll add it to open groups. So now I've added a keyframe. I'm going to slide along here in our screen, and when that hand hits, boom, I'm going to add another keyframe. We'll do Add Open Group, and then we have two keyframes set. What I'm going to do now is making sure I'm not moving off this keyframe, as I'm going to change the hue and saturation to be normal. So now when I preview this little shot here, when I click here, we should see the color come back. So the color goes from inverted and then slowly changes to normal color once that hand hits, and then continues for the rest of the shot. So this is on a rudimentary level how you're going to understand keyframes. You're going to set a keyframe, you're going to set another keyframe, and you're going to make adjustments, and then you're going to see those adjustments change between each keyframe. Anytime you directly manipulate a parameter in the effect preview monitor, Media Composer automatically adds a keyframe every time. So if I had the resize tool out, if I was resizing a shot, say over here, why don't we do that? Let's make sure we're set up here. If I start resizing, so let's say I go farther down the timeline and I grab this bad boy and I squish it, it's automatically going to add a keyframe here. So if I hit the play button, or let's backtrack here. If I hit the play button, oh, that's the only size parameter I've made to this. So it's just ugly. All I can say is it's adding keyframes. It's going to be changing what's happening between each, as long as you're making sure you're set up and adding it to specific groups or active groups. We'll get into that in a second. So if you're setting up or staging an effect, you'll want to press the backspace or Windows or delete on Mac key to remove keyframes. So if I didn't want this keyframe here, I could simply hit delete, and that can delete all my keyframes. I'm going to undo that. I'm going to fix this shot back up, and we're going to come back over here to this color shot because I find editing this color effect a little bit easier. Cool. Many creatives say that 80% of effects work is troubleshooting, so it's just figuring out why isn't this working. That's because as effects build, as they grow in complexity plus keyframing, you need to pay very close attention, and even to the smallest details, especially as they change. Miss one, and then you can face considerable time trying to recommit and fix it, and that can be a daunting process. So that just means that keyframing requires focus to minimize troubleshooting, especially as your skills grow and your effects become more complex. So let's go over some simple workflow tips that you can do to build your skill set when working with keyframes. So to add segment effects and use keyframes to create change over time, we can move the position indicator over the timeline segment that we want to have an effect. So we'll click this. We'll go to the effects workspace. We're already selected in the effects workspace. And then we can go to the effect palette, ensure the filter tab is active, select the category on the left side, and double click the segment effect that we're trying to add. So picking what we're looking for. We'll do a flop on this one. That might be a bad effect to choose. Making sure our effect is selected. Let's do a resize. That should be pretty easy. Awesome. In the effect preview monitor, we'll move the position indicator to the start of a change location. So we'll move this little position indicator to a point in which we want to make a change. And then we'll do one of the following. If available, we'll directly manipulate the effect in the effect preview monitor. So we can drag this down, make it smaller. Or we can click the add keyframe button, the semicolon on our keyboard. Awesome. And then that will also set a keyframe, but I just moved it, so we've got a keyframe added now. So we can move the position indicator to the endpoint of location, and either, if available, we can directly manipulate the effect again. So let's move this downstream, and we're going to manipulate this again. We're going to make it a lot bigger and zoom up. So that would be our change. Or we can click the add keyframe and adjust the parameters in the effect editor. So I could just set another keyframe and then come over here and make my adjustments, right? So let's sum up after we watch this. So we'll play through now. Look at it slowly get bigger. I hope this is making more sense as you're watching it now. So we made a change, we set a keyframe, I did it by default, and then we moved further down the timeline, we set another keyframe, we made another change, and now we've got a shot that's changing over time. Awesome. Cool. The key to success is to ensure that you pay close attention to the active effects segment, the position indicator's location when adding keyframes, and the active keyframes when making adjustments. So making sure you're looking at all of this. You're looking at these, you're looking at your timeline, you're making sure your playhead's in the right place. You're doing all of this at once. In case you're wondering, you can add as many keyframes as you need to animate anything. So if we wanted to just slowly make this change, we could add a bunch of keyframes. We can be very diligent about it and exactly how that adjustment's going to be made. It's obviously going to be smoother if you just set 2. For example, this resize effect that I've done, this little zoom in almost, is going to be a lot smoother if we just do 2. Because going along in here and setting a bunch of keyframes can be highly unnecessary. What if you want to make a change to an entire segment after adding multiple keyframes? You can. You'll just want to select all keyframes before making a global change. To apply a parameter and change across the entire effect, we're going to make sure we select in the preview monitor here. We're going to hit Command A. That will select all of our keyframes here. You can also hit Edit and then select all keyframes. Right now we're at Delete keyframes because we've got them all selected. But anyway, again, hitting Command A. So we're selecting all of them, and then in the effect editor, we can just make a change, and that will have the same effect across the whole thing. Let's change the crop. We'll change the crop on the top, and then boom, that's all there is to it. That change has now been made across the entirety of all the keyframes set in my effect. And unbelievably, this is the last thing that we're going to do for this lesson. Thank you guys so much for watching. Please don't forget to get into the program and do exactly what I'm doing here. Goofing around, messing with things, looking at these markers. Maybe you can start figuring out what some of these markers mean. But definitely get into the labs, get on your computer, get working, and figuring out Avid. Thank you guys so much again for watching, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye-bye.